Thought it was a matter of about
I'll call the meeting, February meeting of the General Government Housing Community Development Committee to order. As is our normal practice, we're going to take a look at the consent agenda first. I'd like to ask if there are people here to speak to some of the demolition list, and we will pull any item that you want to speak about. There's 2010 Rose Street, 440 Allspa Drive, 1300 Cloister Drive, 702 Barbara Jane Avenue. I think we've had communication about that one. 1889 Kentucky Avenue. Okay. West 24 and a half Street. 224 Green Street. Council member, you want to pull that one to talk about?
Please.
Okay. 116 Delabrook Road. 1723 Longview Drive. We've pulled that because, is that correct? Okay, all right. And Mount Vernon Avenue, 401. Okay. As I say, Longview Drive, that's 3D, C3D, has been, is being pulled because there's more information necessary. And Council Member McIntosh wants to talk about C3B. Are there any other items on the consent agenda that the committee would like to pull? Nope.
C8.
C8. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Fun. All right. All righty. May I have then a motion to accept all the rest?
Motion to approve the balance.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All righty. Let's have C3B.
Ordinance ordering the demolition and removal of a structure pursuant to Chapter 10, Article 5, Section 10203F2 of the Code of the City of Winston-Salem, repairs more than 50% of the value of the structure at 6 months. Property located at 224 South Green Street. Property owner Michael R. Foltz.
Eventually. I understand that the owner has absolutely no interest in fixing this up. It is a contributing structure, and perhaps we can get a little report on that.
Okay. All righty. 224 South Green Street. We inspected this property in October of 2013, found some unfit violations, served a complaint notice of hearing and finding an order, and the property became vacant as of February 24th of 2014. The cost to repair, or the estimated cost to repair the structure is $16,210. The fair market value of the structure is $2,519. Based on that information, we are recommending demolition.
Thank you.
Have we had communication with the owners?
Yes, Mr. Foltz came into my office last week, and he said he simply did not have the means to make repairs to the structure.
Okay.
He talked about the age of it and just said that he had no intent. He just wanted time to remove his belongings from the structure.
Do we know if he's amenable to selling this property?
He did not indicate to me, but I believe that there has been some interest expressed in acquiring.
Good afternoon. I have not talked with Mr. Foltz, but I have gotten 2 calls from some interested parties inquiring about purchasing it. So I do know that there is some interest in acquiring the property and repairing it, and I believe those callers are waiting to see the outcome of today's meeting. It really doesn't matter. If there is an order adopted to demolish the property and they want to repair it, we would work with them just to see how serious their intent is and their ability to do it within a reasonable amount of time. And if so, we would entertain that and bring something back to this committee for consideration. Or if it's reasonable based on what we have done in the past and we're able to agree on a voluntary demolition agreement, which would give them a certain amount of time to repair it, then we would not, and with your approval, we would not bring it back. We could just enter into that agreement with them and give them the time to do so, whichever you desire.
Still trying to get my arms around this process. To me, a value of $2,519 on his house is, to me, doesn't equate to market value whatsoever. I guess what I would like to see happen is for the owner to consult with a realtor or somebody who knows market prices and get full value out of it for him. I mean, if I wasn't on council, I'd go buy that house tomorrow for $2,500. That's where it is in the scope of what's happening downtown. I would hate to see this house bulldozed. So I don't know procedurally if we need to extend it or if we just need to go. I would like staff to talk to the owner afterwards and advise him to get some counseling on what the property is worth, not just the first person to step up and come through the city office and offer him, some amount of money for it. I don't know how we do that from a process standpoint, but it seems like it would be.
We could make we could make contact with him. Our value is established by our real estate administrator, so we could certainly talk with him about having it assessed by an independent assessor and providing him with the tools, with the information that we have on available tools, and also the persons that have inquired about acquiring it in case he wants to pursue that.
Okay, because I've paid more money for worse houses very close by this house, within a couple of blocks, and done okay on them. So I think it's possible for him to have a better outcome and for us to have a better outcome than to bulldoze this. So I'd like to have a little bit of time to try to structure that.
Okay, so you want more than the 90 days then for this item? 6 months?
90 days probably will do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
90 days.
So,
Sorry.
then if you'd like to make a motion to demolish or remove,
Dan is whispering in my ear. I should
include the BDA alternative,
which is what?
voluntary
Voluntary.
demolition agreement.
Okay.
It would be a time extender if they have good faith. If purchaser available who looks serious.
What he said.
yes, ma'am.
It sounds like you're moving for approval of the ordinance with the understanding that staff has the ability to enter into a DDA if property owners agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
That. Is there a second to that? Okay. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm very glad that you brought this one up because it could be a wonderful little house.
Cute little house.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I think we're finished with the
Skate park.
consent.
Skate park.
Oh, yes. Sorry. All right. Who wants to tell us about the skate park? Is Tim here? There he is.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What you have before you is a brief update about where we are with the skate park. Let me just kind of share some things with you that you see in the memo that was presented as part of your package. As many of you know, over the past several months, we've been exploring every location that we could for possible locations for a skate park. As part of the fairground master plan that was taking place, We also asked the consultant to look at areas in and around the fairgrounds. That report came back and identified a site, which at that particular time we met with members from the city manager's office, the engineering department, and the fairground staff and Parks and Recreation. What you also see listed there are some of the concerns we had about that particular location. Some that I will point out, the proximity to the cemetery there, the concerns about the location in terms of usage being visible, and limited space for future expansions. So we are continuing to explore locations for our first city skate park. We are currently looking at an area at Happy Hill Park, exploring the locations there. We've got some locations within the park that we're looking very closely at. And if we can identify a location either at that particular site or at another site, we'll bring that information back forward to the manager's office and back to council. What we hope is to, once a location is identified, is to come back with a vision of the skate park equipment that we were able to purchase last year and use at the education building during the entire month of July, and give you some vision in terms of what that skate park might look like. I'll be happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Go ahead. What's budgeted for this project? I see lots of smiles.
The budget is to get the skate park completed and at a particular location. We do know that initially we're going to need somewhere around 120 by 120 feet in terms of concrete. The skate park that was at the fairgrounds was 150 by 150. I'm a little bit afraid to give you numbers yet because we have not picked a location, and what we're trying to do is look at a location where some of the infrastructure is already in place. For instance, parking, driveway, access to water for water fountains, and access to existing bathrooms. So right now, let's just say my budget is flexible.
Okay, and is this coming out of bond money, or is this coming from general budget?
We will be looking not only at some bond funding, but also at possibly pulling some of the two-thirds bond funding that we have as part of our capital plan. So we'll be looking at all budgets to make sure we have enough money to put the skate park in.
My hope is we do a really good one,
Yeah.
a really first-class operation. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Have anything?
Yes. And just a question and a concern. I was under the impression, and maybe I'm speaking too forward, that the skate park was going to be at the fairground. And that being said, that's why we did the prototype at the fairground. That's why another piece to the master plan at the fairground, that we can utilize the area more than what we do now, besides the fair and a few other whatevers, even after meeting with the consultants. I didn't know that we were looking at any land near the cemetery. I was under the impression that where we were looking was at the fairground, to drive people there on the north side of town to give us some type of, in the northwest, to give us some type of engagement with the citizens and the young people, particularly in that every Friday that we've had for young people in the past year or so during the summer has been at the fairground. So I'm pleading my case that that skate park stays at the fairground.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Let me ask Mr. Rao to comment because he's worked with the consultants on the fairgrounds.
Councilmember Adams, the consultants have provided us a memo detailing their evaluation of potential locations on the fairgrounds property, and I'm happy to forward that to the council for your information. What they determined was that on the fairgrounds footprint proper, meaning the fairgrounds itself, not necessarily the property across the street, across from Shore Fair, that the impact on the revenue generation potential of the fair and the events at the fair, or potential investments in the facilities there, the annex or the education building, they didn't really see any viable locations there within that area, including the Midway. And so when they looked at the property across the street, they're adjacent to Oddfellow Cemetery, that in their minds was a viable location. They did recognize the fact that any construction there would have to be a great deal of sensitivity because of the location of the cemetery. But I think that their concern about putting it on the footprint proper was, basically the impact to fairgrounds operations in terms of revenue generation potential and providing the facilities for the events there on the fairgrounds.
Point well taken, Mr. Ruff. But the point of the matter is, Mr. Garrity and Mr. Grant, is that if we're doing a footprint and spending money to pay consultants to tell us what they think, which I respect subject matter experts, but they don't live here. They haven't lived in the North Ward or the Northwest Ward, and they haven't been here when we've used the facility for the young people during the summer. Again, I ask staff to look at the fairground to put the skate park. Understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess I can't let this pass without saying that certainly if Councilmember Montgomery were here, who has the East Ward is where Happy Hill Park is, and of course South Ward that's right there by it. I know that sounds strange, but it's true. I think that Happy Hill Park would be a wonderful location for a skate park. So we're going to have to agree.
Oh yeah, we're going to agree to disagree, and we're going to be talking about this.
Okay.
The decision at the end of the day, Madam Chair, at the end of the day, we're going to all sit down and talk about it. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Garrity, I brought up the skate park in 2009, did I not?
Yes, you did.
The skate park.
The issue, and we'll bring back the details, according to the consultant, and my choice, my preference was the fairgrounds because we were there last summer. We've already branded that as the location for skateboard park, and there are lots of other amenities there to help service it. What the consultant said was during that 10-day span of the actual Dixie Classic Fair, that every inch of space is taken up by the fair, and that if we build a permanent skateboard park, which is what we're trying to build, it would take away from either the RV park or I can't remember the other locations, but they all would have a negative impact on the fair during that 10 days. But we'll bring you all that information.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Let's get, please, the specific numbers involved, and we can just make an informed decision on whether we're willing to forego that amount of annual revenue in order to have a specific location.
Absolutely. We'll bring you all the details back.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Tim, thank you. And this is information, so, all right. Very good. I think we can go to our general agenda. G1.
Ordinance amending Chapter 74 of the City Code relating to streets and sidewalks, buskers/street performers. This item was continued from the January Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee.
Hi there.
Good afternoon, Chairman Light, members of council. You may remember that back in January at this meeting, staff brought recommendations for an ordinance that would address street performers or buskers in downtown Winston-Salem. The recommendations that we brought were based on public input sessions that we had and feedback that we had received from stakeholders throughout the process, as well as taking a look at how other communities were addressing the issue of street performers. At the time we had those specific recommendations, you should have also received a spreadsheet with benchmarking the other communities, as well as recommendations that were submitted by a gentleman on behalf of street performers with a list of separate recommendations that they had proposed. New this month, you have a draft ordinance that translates the recommendations that were discussed at the last meeting into the actual ordinance language that, if adopted, would be included within city code. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And I believe we also have several stakeholders that were here at the last meeting. Several of them are back for this meeting if the committee has any questions.
Okay, we'll give them a chance to speak, but are there any questions up front? Yes.
I had a question about the penalty clause. It's section I on the last page. Class 3 misdemeanor. It seems like a little steep as the starting point. Isn't it more routine for us to have an infraction be an infraction, like a traffic ticket kind of fine?
I will have to defer to the city attorney's office for that.
Al Andrews from City Attorney's Office, Councilmember Light and Councilmember Bessie. The provision that's there is the punishment provision. Is the typical one that we see in many of our ordinances regulating this behaviors that happen downtown. You certainly have latitude, but that captures the provisions that bring in the state's granting of authority to cities to regulate these matters and how they're punished. So that language is replicated from other sections of the code and placed here. Does not limit your latitude, but that's why it's placed there.
Can you give a couple of other examples where we...
Noise ordinance would be an example.
So noise ordinance is misdemeanor, not an infraction to start with.
Right.
Okay. Anything else?
The majority, as I believe, are this way now. I did not bring a list. Certainly we can gather some better examples perhaps to give you guidance, but it was simply transported over from other sections of the code that apply to these kinds of restrictions and these types of activities.
Okay. Thanks. I raise that question in this context in particular because a lot of the proposed ordinance here is detailed like, 100 feet away, 5 feet sidewalk, the kind of thing that you'd think of as, well, that's, you hit them with a $100 fine unless they stand there and say, I'm not going to, and tell the police officer I'm not going to move, in which case, then you can escalate it. But I raise that point. I may make that as a suggestion at the appropriate time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
To some degree, I agree with you, Councilmember Bessie, but again, just like in the past few years, we're coming up with these new ordinances and new innovative ideas to continue to spur economic development downtown and people going downtown. I am of the belief that we don't want, I'm with you, I don't think we want to fine them to the point that I'm concerned about what the end game will be on the judicial system, or who is going to be following up and dealing with these fines if we do this. I was hoping that we would do something, and to Attorney Andrews' point, on a lighter side, just again to get it started, because we can always, like the cell towers or anything else, we can go back and we can redo it, but I don't want to penalize people, because most of the time the people doing this, they aren't rich people. They're doing this to make some money, to do, quality of life things. So I'm concerned that we need to add some more detail to that one. I think we need to be more specific versus saying not more than $500, and I agree with you about the first offense, the second offense, something to that effect, whereas it lends itself to some end point, but...
Are you suggesting an escalating?
Yes, yes,
fine
depending on,
until,
yes.
Okay, all right.
If I may, just one other point. I was sitting here thinking about the analogy used, and one thing I think probably unfortunately, we rarely see the noise ordinance actually enforced.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons is that it's maybe that it's treated as a particularly, it's treated as a criminal offense as opposed to an infraction, and therefore it's anticipated that you're going to need such a high level of proof to go after it that, as a practical matter, it's never enforced. it might be worth looking at whether we want to modify our noise ordinance to say, okay, let's go with an infraction and hand some tickets out and deal with recurring noise problems where they exist.
Perhaps we could ask for, as Mr. Andrews alluded to, different infractions in the code and what those fines or penalties are, and as you say, maybe make a judgment about some of the others.
I'm seeing some real skepticism on our attorney's face.
Yeah.
I just want to point out a couple of things. Section 14-4 of the state statute, violation of local ordinances, misdemeanor, says except as provided in subsection B, if any person shall violate an ordinance of a county, city, town, or metropolitan sewerage district created under Article 5 of Chapter 162A, he shall be guilty of a Class 3 misdemeanor and shall be fined not more than $500. So that language comes right out of the statute. B pertains to operation or parking of vehicles, where you're basically talking about a fine, an infraction, and a penalty of not more than $50. What we have done in some other ordinances is to decriminalize the ordinance and assess a civil penalty of different amounts. If you prefer something like that, perhaps we can look at that structure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Mr. No? Okay. Okay.
All along during our discussions on this, I think there's been unanimity in that we feel like we're starting off with a baseline, and I think a very well-researched and very well-written code, but I think everybody feels like we may have to come back and modify this, as things unfold. Reading through this, what is the geographic boundaries of this? Is this in the CBD?
It is, I believe the Central Business District is specifically referenced, and that may be by default the only areas where street performers could perform due to the width of the sidewalk. There are the areas of the city, downtown or otherwise, that are wide enough to accommodate a performance plus maintain that required 5 width of unobstructed space.
Right.
So I believe the ordinance does specifically reference Central Business District, but it's probably limited in other areas as well.
But it would extend up to the entertainment district?
I believe so, yes. Yes.
There's been discussion about whether 11 o'clock is the proper shutdown time or 12 o'clock is the proper shutdown time. And I think we may find as we go along that 11 o'clock is the proper time for 4th Street, where you have a much higher concentration of residential. But the entertainment district, sort of by the nature of the types of businesses that are there and the lack of residential density, maybe that's an appropriate spot that we do look at for a 12 o'clock close or a shutdown. So the other thing I'd like to try to explore is that, this whole discussion has come about because essentially one group of performers. I'd really like to see us reach out more to Winston-Salem State, to Wake Forest, to School of the Arts, to try to get a more diverse group of performers down there, because I think this has been somewhat of a negative discussion as we go along. I think it has all the possibility to be a very positive thing that we can use to showcase our talent in the city.
One question I had was, I don't understand the thinking on Sunday through Wednesday at a certain time, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at another time. It would seem to me that the weekend, Friday and Saturday, should be a later time, like midnight or something like that, whereas Sunday through Thursday could be an earlier, like 10 o'clock cutoff time. What was the mindset?
Chairman Light, I believe the thinking there is that for those that are not me, Thursday night is frequently another night of the weekend and is more active downtown than, say, a Monday or Tuesday night. That does mirror with the Sidewalk Cafe ordinance. There is an extra hour for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights that the sidewalk cafes are able to operate.
Okay.
So it's almost like another weekend night.
Okay, see, that's I'm never down there that late. And that's when you're there, aren't you? Okay, all right. But I do wonder about. Jeff, you have a good number of people who live downtown in your ward.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the 10 and 11 o'clock is appropriate then and not later?
From the feedback that I've gotten, I think people are comfortable with those hours.
Okay.
And I think the merchants maybe are pushing for a little bit later. But again, it's just something I think we need to see how it goes along. We can always modify it.
Yeah.
I think we start on the low side, and if it works well, and maybe we can push it up a little bit.
All right. Are there any other questions? If not, we'll allow some of the people who have signed up to address the committee. Okay, I have Harry Knabb. You'll have 3 minutes, so talk fast.
No problem.
I'm Harry Knabb, Chairman and Chief Executive of the Arts for Art's Sake, the APHIS Group. And we reviewed the work the city has done. And we are, as a group, we're promoting artists. We want to see art downtown. We want to see musical art downtown. We're totally in favor of it. To some of the conversations the council brought up today, I think weekends, 12 o'clock is fine. I mean, I don't think it's, especially not on 4th Street. Like Artivity on the Green, we have a pavilion there. We're going to let buskers play there, okay? And we'll abide by whatever rules that the council sets. We're going to follow lockstep. But we think 12 o'clock is appropriate, especially on Liberty Street, where there's not a residence within a couple of 100 feet. I mean, so there's not going to really, and with no amplification, I think it's going to fill a thing for the city and make a quality of life, as Council Member Adams said. That it's a good thing. So we are our committee caucus, and we're Art for Art's Sake is totally in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. Okay. Wayne Tharp. Did I do that right? Yeah.
Yes, I'm a downtown resident, and my wife and I both enjoy music quite a bit.
Use your name and address.
Address.
397 North Green Street, 27101. And we both appreciate music. We think what's happening downtown is very much headed in the right direction, and invite you to come down and enjoy it sometime with us. And I'm working with the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership. Listened to quite a bit of the involvement in presenting this, and I think we're headed on the right track, and I encourage you to move forward.
Thank you, sir. Did you put that? Okay, all right. Okay. Susie Baxter. If you'll give your name and address, Ms. Baxter, although I think we know you.
Hi, I'm Susie Baxter, 310 West 4th Street, apartment 206. I do manage the Nissen Building apartments, and I live on site. And I've been there 9 years, and the Nissen Building's going on 10 years. This past year has been the most difficult for our residents to be able to sleep because of the percussion and the noise amplification coming from 4th Street. Our residents love the music that comes from downtown, but there needs to be some type of guideline set for an ending time. I feel the buskers do want to go until 2 a.m., and I feel from a housing standpoint that's unacceptable. And I'm looking for housing for everyone else. I'm supporting all the other property managers that can't leave their office today. That would be 50 West at the courthouse. That would be the Reynolds Building. That would be the Village Lofts. That would be the future Pepper Building, our building, Winston Factory Lofts, and the Gallery Lofts, and Plant 64. They can't be here today, but they feel, as I do, that there needs to be some type of rules set so when residents move in, we can hand them the rules and that they'll know so there won't be any confusion after they move in on what the street performers can and cannot do. This year, I personally made over 100 phone calls after 2 a.m. asking if the police could go and stop them on the corner of 4th and Spruce, because that just was not a reasonable time. It wasn't so much coming from certain instruments. Unfortunately, it was coming from mostly the percussion. We hear them now going until midnight. So far, my phone hasn't called me late night from the residents saying that midnight was too late. I'm not opposed to that. I still feel during the week when we have to get up early in the morning to go to work that that's not acceptable. So I'm more for the time frame so we know what the rules would be.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Baxter?
I would love to answer anything. I mean, you know, it's been a difficult year for all of us that have lived downtown, even the restaurants that pay me rent that are in the building, Mellow Mushroom, Camino Bakery, and the Artisan. It has affected them for a little portion when the street performers were playing in front of Washington Park. You can imagine that straight across from the apartments, and it was just too loud. It was too loud this summer, and it was a continual song, the same song over and over again. So that was also the repetitiveness and just the location of the street performers and the hours of their playing time. But for the most part, our residents do love this music. It just needs to stop at a certain time. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Mr. Bessie has a question.
Ms. Baxter, are you saying that that the problem is primarily the percussion, or that it's the hours for the music in general?
I'm for both. It would be definitely for the percussion and for the hours. I mean, you're still hearing. It really affects the people just in the Nissen building differently depending on what side of the building you're living in and if you're in the interior part of the channel of the Nissen building. Being at a high rise, obviously the sound's going to carry all the way to the top. Some people on 18 are going to hear it worse than people on floor 2. But the percussion did play a key factor in this past summer with why all this debate is really happening now. But I think now we need to set this before all this rest of the housing opens, because, you know, we're going to grow down 4th Street. There's going to be other restaurants and other bars down that direction, and these street performers are going to want to play there. Imagine when Kimpton Hotels opens. They're not going to tolerate this. Their housing above there is not going to tolerate it either. So something needs to be set now so we all know what the rule is.
And if I'm not mistaken, the ordinance as written does suggest that percussion instruments be prohibited. Yeah. So that might, where'd you go? I think that's right, yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Rodney Davis? Mr. Davis, if you'll give your name and address, please.
Rodney Davis, 310 West 4th Street, apartment 1601, the Nissen building. Just want to say that I'm in full support of the staff and what they've done here. Like Ms. Baxter, I do agree that just some clear-cut resolution as to what the rules are as far as timing and maybe the prohibitiveness of loud drums and percussion instruments. I think the work that we've done here in drafting the proposal here is great. I read over it and I think it's just wonderful. I think that most of our residents do like having music downtown. I do feel, though, that just making sure that there are clear-cut times that it shuts off. I think 11 o'clock during the week is great, and maybe 12 o'clock on the weekend is just fine.
Any questions of Mr. Davis? Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay, Jason Thiel.
Jason Thiel, 305 West 4th Street, Suite 2E, Winston-Salem 27101. I serve as the staff person, the president of the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership. We have admired the way that the city's handled the process. They've been very open through the process, and I think when we started this conversation, many months ago, we want to make sure that we frame it in a number of ways. First is that this is pretty much standard operating process for an evolution of our downtown. And so I think we were a little bit behind in some of our other cities that have already adopted this. We knew that it would be high profile. Certainly there have been a lot of conversations. And I want to thank the staff and the council, the manager, the city attorney, and all of the staffs for putting together what I think is a very reasonable ordinance. And so you're going to have some tweaks about it. One of the things that we want to do in adopting something like this is represent something that works as a grand compromise for everyone involved. And I think you're narrowing in on that. I think when you've got several groups that are reasonably going to be upset on both sides, that's probably when you're narrowing down towards the, so I think we're close. I want to thank you very much for putting up with me personally through this process. I know I've been a bit of a nuisance, but the reason it's important because this isn't about anybody in this room right now. Our city is going to grow, and we're on a spectacular trajectory. Imagine 15 years from now, that's really where we're trying to actually think about. We're going to have density much greater than we have now. The precedent you set now will still be in force 15 years from now. You may tweak it, but you certainly don't want to tweak it on the front end. You don't want to let the rope out too much on the front end. Remember, we're going from not being allowed to we do want to make sure we come back and check on it. So I would ask you to be a little more conservative than on the liberal side. And I think the ordinance, probably I had to compromise a little bit my own self with some of it. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you for your thoughtfulness.
Thank you, Jason. And thank you for the work you've done on this. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak? Yeah. Oh, wow. Look at what you wrote.
I'm telling you.
Saw you.
You got a truck?
You look like one of your heroes, Karl Marx.
No, Grizzly Adams.
All right.
No, that's your hero.
All right.
No.
Name and address, please.
Richard Miller, a.k.a. Grizzly Adams, 626 North Trade Street, sometimes referred to as Moses. Anyway,
Rarely.
wanted to comment just briefly about this. Yeah, it's a good thought to know that we're having a problem like this. This is kind of a good problem. It's a result of progress. However, I just want us to keep in mind we don't want to kill the golden goose. I think 11 and 12 o'clock is a good compromise that I'm hearing out of folks, but we need to remember that the folks that have moved into downtown need to remember that this was a downtown business district and always was prior up till let's say only prior to 1900 was it mostly residential. After 1900 it became mostly a commercial district. So residential has just now in the last 15 years started coming back to downtown. One of the things I am concerned about is that, and I warned the developers at a partnership meeting way before Jason came to the partnership about 15 years ago. I said, developers, you're going to have to address noise issues because as our downtown progresses, we're going to have noise. Nobody believed it. Nobody thought, oh, that's you're just talking off the top of your head. And I said, well, I'm just telling you, down the road you're going to have this, and here we are. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about it. We just need to make sure that developers need to understand if they're going to continue to build residential, they're going to have to address noise issues in their buildings. I warned the developers of the Nissen building that they needed to be as proactive as they could during their construction about noise issues, about making windows as soundproof as they possibly could, because eventually if we had performances and we had music and downtown nightlife, we were going to have these issues. So we don't want to kill the golden goose, because if we roll up the carpets at 5 o'clock, we're going to be back to being a dead town again. Because I remember when it was dead. I could walk down Trade Street down to 4th Street at 5 o'clock, and you wouldn't see a soul, and every building would be dark and empty. And I know it. If we don't want to go back to that, we have to be careful not to mess up the golden goose, and you got to balance it. But the residents have got to understand that the businesses have got to have activity to survive. If not, we're just going to have empty buildings again, and we don't want that.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Yes, sir. Your name and address, please.
My name is Edward Robson. I live at 643 Holly Avenue. I've got several points to make about laws. Laws come from precedent, and there is a great precedent of busking in this town. I don't know how many remember far back enough to Guitar Gabriel, but musicians have often begun on the street before they got to indoor gigs that let them play in heated spaces, climate-controlled spaces. Everyone who's played down there, that's what they're dreaming of, but they got to put their music out there. Talk about the stakeholders. I think one set of stakeholders that have been left out here are the fans. They come late at night. They tip late at night. That ought to tell us something. The fact that most of the tips that the performers get come after midnight, when people are coming from the bars, not when they're on their way to the bars, says something about when people want to hear the music. Those stakeholders are widely spread. They aren't just the downtown people. They're people from all over town and well beyond. Visitors to our town, the tourists. I would like this City of the Arts to be a place that people come for music and things like that. As for the complaints, as Ms. Baxter pointed out, we've had very few complaints since the percussionist with the loud wooden box that he liked to beat on with his lighter ceased to be part of the group that's busking now. That was what was carrying. Nobody seems to complain about the saxophone for some reason. A saxophone is a loud instrument. It doesn't come close to a trumpet, of course, but it doesn't take amplification to make an instrument loud. But the fact that there haven't been continuing complaints says something about the fact that the law of common courtesy, the law of common decency, is actually being in effect. Julian has always had a personal policy of respectful treatment of the people in his space. If they aren't happy, he's not going to be happy. He doesn't want to be someplace he's not wanted. So if someone has come to him and complained, he's looked for, how can I adjust this? Can I turn down the volume? Can we just turn down the percussion? Should we move to a different location? He doesn't want people unhappy. He's really been bent over backwards to be accommodating. Now, there's a simple economic law also here, which is you don't sell someone something they've already got. Specifically here, a permit. A permit is not for a right. A permit is for an extraordinary privilege. When you sell someone the right to block traffic and crank up the volume to a very high level, that's appropriate use of a permit. But the point you have to remember here is the right to sing a song, according to the Supreme Court, is no different from the right to give a speech. Where do you have that right? Any street corner in the country, at any time of the day or of the night. As long as your exercise of your freedom of expression is not compromising someone else's right to the enjoyment of their property, then you are within your rights, and no one can tell you differently. We have a noise ordinance because you can't make a rule that restricts only one group of people's freedom of speech. It has to be even-handed.
Thank you, Mr. Robeson. Your time is up, but appreciate your comments. Was there anyone else? Yes, sir?
Yes. My name is Julian Robson, 643 Holly Street. Arguably, myself and Sir Charles Adams are the two buskers that this really affects, and I think a lot of people don't really realize that y'all are talking about how we make a living. Y'all are talking about my job. And these people who are talking about like the other restaurant holders that couldn't, or restaurant owners who couldn't be here, I made a petition, and it was just talked about as my opinion. It's a 200-person petition, and they could have petitioned. They didn't. They are not here to speak their piece. That's how this works, is that we come and speak our piece. So because not all of my fans could come and speak their piece, I made a petition that says, no, not everybody agrees with this idea of 11 and 12 o'clock. Nobody agrees with... All of these people are angry when they hear about, the fact that y'all are trying to stop us before 2 in the morning when they are still being loud downtown. If you haven't been downtown at 2 o'clock in the morning to see what it's like, then I don't really think that you should be talking about how to change it. Come downtown, see what happens other than us. It's loud. Amplifiers don't change anything, really. I mean, trumpets are going to be 3 times as loud as an amplifier. And you can amplify all you want, you're still not going to be as loud as that. And it's still going to travel further as far as the trumpet. So, I mean, but amplifiers are necessary for an electric guitar. They are necessary for a keyboard. So you're basically restricting entire instruments. Percussion is, that falls under freedom of speech. You can play a drum. You can't just say, hey, this instrument is banned. And in general, I think somebody's taking the wrong attitude as far as creating these frameworks, which is suggested to me by things like trying to restrict our sign size down to an 8 by 11. I mean, whose idea was that, and what does that say about what they're trying to do? Now, and I would also say the people who this affects, they did not just choose to live downtown. They chose to live on the busiest streets of downtown. The streets that things are going to happen that make us a good city. If you look in any city that has a nightlife, it's going to happen until the bars close. That nightlife is going to continue to be happening, and there are people who love living around it. There are those people who live overlooking Bourbon Street in New Orleans, and how do they sleep at night, you wonder? I don't know, but they're paying a lot of money to live there. And they recognized in the first place that that was what they were going to be dealing with. But yeah, if we're within the noise ordinance, I think we have, if we are within the noise ordinance, the only difference between us and anyone else is A, that we play music, which is protected speech, and B, that we accept tips. And I don't think that y'all's problem is that we're accepting tips. So if we're within the noise ordinance, then all y'all are arguing about is our freedom of speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robeson. Okay. Yeah, Will?
My name is Will Knott. Address is 604A North Trade Street. I'm with the Downtown Arts District Association. Music, performance, whether it's buskers or a mime or whoever, are all part of art, and we appreciate that. The concerns that the Arts District people have, and I think they are all addressed, at least they were in the last draft I saw, were one, not interfering with the business doorway, and number two, just that when an event is being held, that the permit owner, such as our Downtown Arts District First Fridays, are still the ones who would say, yes, it's okay for you to be here or not. We typically like to have them. We like them to register with us so we can put several of them in several places so they don't conflict. But the Downtown Arts District Association does appreciate the amount of work that's going into this, Ken and everybody else, and we do support the ordinance.
Thank you, Will. Yes, ma'am. We're going to make this our last speaker so that we have a chance to talk about it. Yes,
Good
ma'am.
afternoon. My name is Dr. Kim DeWint, and I live at 1028 Franklin Street in Winston-Salem. And I'm originally from New York, though, from New York City. And I mention that because I grew up in a place where there's lots of busking going on in the context of many, many residential areas. So I would say to you, first of all, that the issue here is that people aren't accustomed to living in a location where the arts, music, is happening, and is a very vital part of the experience of being in a city. And so I think that that's something that needs to be examined more closely is that, again, you have very, very high rent areas in New York City that have buskers, you know. So, and I do totally understand the concern about wanting to sleep and so forth. But again, as was pointed out, you know, I think some adjustments need to be made for the fact that one chooses to live downtown and on a busy street. And so, you know, I sympathize with that issue. In other words, I see both sides. You know, a consideration that I'd like people to think about is when I was here last time, we were talking about employment options for people. We were talking about tech jobs and such. We need to realize that the arts are also a potential choice of career, of vocation. And it concerns me that I'm not aware of any artists or musicians that have been included in the process for drafting this document that would be so restrictive, so that you don't have the input of those individuals who understand the nature of what they do, being a part of this process of drafting a document. So I really would suggest to you that you reconsider whether to proceed in this matter without having that input as an active part of this process.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ken, I'll ask a question of you.
Of me?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Ken or Kim? Ken. Buskers were, in fact, involved in the Sir? The buskers were invited to the discussions.
Those that we were aware of were. We also included several arts-based organizations that were included and asked them to share the information as well as notice about the public input sessions that we had. So those that we were not aware of, we did try to reach by engaging them through organizations that may be aware of other performers and other musicians that may be around.
So, and is it your impression that you did have input from some of those musicians?
We did. Certainly the most active were both Mr. Robson and Mr. Robson. We did hear from them, had their input. Honestly, I cannot recall the others that we may have heard from, but I do know that we did try to include them in the process.
Okay. All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
I don't have a question, I have a comment. And my comment is much like what I've commented on this entire process since we've been going through it. That is one in which represent half of downtown and the residential side that is continuing to grow as well. And the thing that I want us to keep in mind, I think this has been a very healthy process for us as a community and city to go through, and it is an effect of our success as a community. But one thing I want us to be very, very clear on, and that I'm not sure that this actually achieves in the process of putting in these guidelines and restrictions at this point, is that what I have always advocated is the fact that downtown Winston-Salem is a place for everybody, both residentially as well as from a communal standpoint of being able to come in downtown Winston-Salem. And nothing that we do should be in a place that makes downtown something that it's not. And what I mean by that is if individuals seek to live in suburbia, they should stay in suburbia and not come to downtown Winston-Salem. Because I've consistently heard over the last few years since I've been on council issues that have come around the noise pieces, which is good because we have residents that begets the commercial pieces, that begets other things that happens in a growing downtown city. But what we have to understand in that same process is we've been at the same point in having conversation and dialogue in reference to the Black Theater Festival and the drumming that takes place. And what do? We moved the drummers from where they were in a location that was impacting residents in a particular area in downtown because it was a problem for something that was taking place that was culturally pleasing to a community. So we moved that location to another place. We got complaints, and as a council member who's lived downtown and lived in a place, I got phone calls about trains and still get phone calls about trains that ride past a building downtown, which the train was there before the building was, and you knew the train was there once you moved in. And then we get calls as well as when motorcycles drive downtown during the summertime because of the noise that's made by the motorcycles that drive downtown, and because you have the tall buildings and the buildings that are there, it amplifies the noise. So what I'm saying is that we have to understand in this context that there will be additional noise in the process, as well as what we deal with on the other side of that, how we work through this process. And again, I think staff has done a great job of working with, and I think most people would agree with the comments that I made, is coming back to the place of these very narrow details of these timing pieces that still concern me, because there is that question of whether or not these are the times of which and when things take place that are the beneficial places of what we enjoy, where we look at the sound ordinance. And I brought that up the last time in terms of when we look at sound ordinance and businesses and where they currently work, how does this differ from where we are within that process? And I am one who is less inclined to add an additional restriction if we already have something in place that can be used to effectively engage in that area. And some would argue that we don't, and that's why we're here now at this place. But that's my 2 cents. I'm not on this committee. I'll be able to have more dialogue when this comes to full council, but that's just where I sit on this item.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah. Comment. You know, when the amount of material that we have on this proposed ordinance, some of it overlaps and some of it doesn't. Again, I commend staff too as well for all of the work you put into this. This is something new. I find it always so difficult when people just shut down on everything new, you know. New is change. That's a good thing. And like they tell you, if you can't deal with change right now, then you might want to move to another planet, because everything is changing around us all the time. I saw here when I read this that I think we need to find the win-win. I think, as Jason said, we're getting close. As Richard and some of the people, we're getting close. We're not going to get it on the dime the first time. As some of us, you've heard us say earlier, we're going to have to probably come back to the drawing board once we see how it starts to unfold. We cannot predict how this is going to go, but we definitely know we need some guidelines and something in place. I agree that downtown is downtown. You know, it is what it is, and it's probably just going to get bigger, and it's going to get louder and noisier, and people come here because it's loud and it's noisy. It's vibrant. That's what it is. But some of the things I read about, you know, I know the busters are saying that they don't want the signs to be regulated. Well, I disagree with that. I'm one of those people that don't particularly like billboards. I don't like flags flying all over the community. I don't like the little tax signs that we see go out every day. I don't like litter on a stick. I don't like, and I feel if we got to have it, I'd rather be regulated than somebody got an 18 by 18 and somebody come up with an 81 by 81 like a television. I'm sorry. I'm, you know, the noise ordinance, I agree with Councilmember Montgomery and others about that. I'm sure that we have overlaid where we could with the noise ordinance to try to make it fit. But if we already have something that you know, takes care of that, then we need to make sure that we're using it. And as we move forward, we're going to see ordinances that we have on the books. We're going to start to have to initiate them and implement them as they are to make them work. But everybody got to understand, we all got to give a little bit, take a little bit. Everybody's not going to get it their way. We're trying to meet halfway somewhere near the middle. I didn't say in the middle, somewhere near the middle. And I think we need to be happy with that we have this piece of legislation here to help us make that decision. I think we're going in the right direction. I really do.
Thank you. If we're going to have to cut it off, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I certainly respect my friend's distaste for regulation, but I can't share it, you know, categorically. I think that time, place, and manner restrictions are routinely upheld on free speech of all kinds. A public right-of-way and throughway is for movement without a and necessary right to remain indefinitely at any given place in the public right-of-way at any time. I think that the question is around the details. I think that we have a good draft here. I'd like to see it move forward. I would like to see the penalty decriminalized.
Yes.
I would be willing to entertain a midnight Thursday through Saturday, but I'm not going to push it if that's not a majority view. And I think that there was a point raised worth consideration regarding amplification for particular types of instruments that are necessarily reliant on some internal amplification process like a keyboard. I won't go so far as the electric guitars. I don't think they're outdoor instruments, to tell you the truth, except in big venues. But I think the keyboard's a reasonable query and would like to see some further explanation of that.
If you've heard suggestions, certainly one thing that I'd like to hear more about is why our noise ordinance seems not to be, very good or at least is not being enforced. So how could that play into this ordinance? I would also entertain a later time on weekends. I mean, go to 2 o'clock or whatever on weekends, but that's too late. See, already, that's, I'm being too liberal. Who said that? Okay. Also, if we could bring us back a different penalty, maybe a tiered thing, and to decriminalize it, that would be great. So thank you for the work you've done on this, and, we'll keep going.
One more comment,
Oh,
Madam
yes.
Chair. I agree with Councilmember Bessie that I would like to see the time change to follow the noise ordinance. I'd also like to see Thursday, Friday, Saturday move to midnight. And I'd also like to see in the entertainment district, which is far away, moving to the north. I would even, again, entertain that based on whatever the noise ordinance says. Attorney, do you know, any of you, what that says right offhand? Okay, because at that end of town, there's slight residential, and I see, from my point of view, when downtown 4th shuts down, in the near future, I think all of the people are going to start to move to the entertainment district. Once it's up and moving and vibrant, that's where they'll be to the late hours, and that's why we created that district. So, okay?
Okay, thank you. Good discussion, and we'll continue it. Ken, thanks very much. Okay, we're only on G2.
You're finished. The only one that wasn't here yesterday was Dan.
Madam Chair, with regard to G2 and G3, I feel like I was fully briefed last month at our committee when we moved ahead.
And I think you're the only one who missed
Wasn't here
the discussion yesterday. So, Mr. City Manager, what was the disposition of that's just a report. We don't need to, and the same with Turn.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of anxiety, Dan, about how we're going to police the Turn, how the money is used, and all this, that, and other. So it's too is a work in progress. So shall we move on to G4?
Draft public art plan.
Kelly, thank you. I'm excited about this.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This is an informational item on the draft public art plan, and we'll be back again next month for your March meeting. When the planning department was engaged in the public input portion of the Legacy 2030 comprehensive plan,
Public art was one of the items generating the most support. And in response to that, we presented a report to the Planning Board and this committee last summer, and at your recommendation created a public art plan. And this plan was endorsed by the Planning Board last month. There are many reasons for public art, for a community to create public art. And one of the big reasons is Winston-Salem's identity. We're the city of arts and innovation. When we're talking about public art, we mean art in the public realm, visible from public space, publicly owned or privately owned, any medium, but as long as it can be viewed from public space, this is what we consider to be public art. This plan is the product of months of work by a citizens committee, of several arts and community organizations representatives, and many of them are here today. They're a great group to work with. If you could all please stand up real quick. This isn't the whole group, but this is many of them.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Thanks. So the vision of this group for public art is to have many types of public art in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, from murals to sculptures to interactive pieces to functional pieces like bus stops and bike racks, in locations that are equitably distributed throughout the community, parks, neighborhood gateways, schools, libraries, and of course downtown. Winston-Salem's and Forsyth County's current approach to public art is mostly passive. It's mostly arts organizations that create public art, and they often run into problems when it comes to using public property. Several other cities in the state have public art plans, and they fund public art through a variety of different mechanisms. And they all have appointed citizens public art commissions or boards that oversee this type of investment. And that's where we find obstacles to public art here. Whether an organization or even the city itself wants to create public art, it needs this organization that can organize projects and coordinate with city and county departments and pursue grant opportunities, among other problems. So this plan's central recommendation is the creation of a public art commission, which would act as a working body at the nexus of these four components of public art, which are ideas and proposals, artists that would create the art, funding, and public space. The key responsibilities of this commission would be to carry out the vision of the public art plan, commission works of public art, designate sites where art would be an asset, serve as the artist selection panel, research funding opportunities, and market and advertise the public art program and individual public art projects. Staff responsibilities would be within the Planning and Development Services Department and the City and County Managers' offices. And those would be support to the commission, including meeting support, executing contracts, making payments to artists, coordinating with appropriate city and county departments for maintenance, repair, community outreach, permits, other requirements of public art. So this would be a working commission, nine-member commission, and what our committees recommended is nine members in these following categories: 2 civic and business leaders, 3 arts professionals, and 4 at-large community members. And the committee felt strongly that this group not be made up completely of professional artists, but be people that are passionate about public art that could participate in this process. There would be 4-year terms, and then subcommittees that for community engagement, individual project implementation, and others as the commission sees fit. These subcommittees would have one commission member on them to lead that group. Funding. Part of the city and county investment would be hosting public art on public property. Commission would also attempt to raise money for specific projects through crowdfunding or donations and grants. One opportunity might be construction project budgets. If there was a budget for, say, a bus stop, Commission could work with, say, the transportation department. If they had a $5,000 budget for a bus stop, perhaps they could create an artistic bus stop within that same budget. And in the past, the city has used the occupancy tax for public art, and in fact has a public art reserve. And the plan recommends using these mechanisms again, and also investigating other funding mechanisms. A lot of cities use what's called percent for art, where it's a certain percentage of the capital budget, often 1%, sometimes 0.5%, sometimes more. And another responsibility of the Commission would be community engagement, namely marketing, advocacy, and education. And the next steps would be to consider whether to adopt a public art plan, take this plan to the county commissioners who are interested in hearing more about it, and then if both the city and the county adopt the plan, developing an interlocal agreement, determining a budget, and appointing a public art commission. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of Kelly? Tell me, we are in the process of talking at this point with the Arts Council about sculpture walk and whatever. What does your committee see as the relationship between the Arts Commission and the Arts Council?
The Arts Council would be seen as, one of these outside arts organizations, and the Commission would be, the city's representative for, the public right-of-way, and would be able to, work with the Arts Council on opportunities like the sculpture walk, and really kind of facilitate this process. Right now, they might have a lot of questions about, where can we put public art on 4th Street or Trade Street, perhaps. So this Public Art Commission would be, the stopping off point for them that would be able to answer all of these questions and move that process along. We've had other organizations, somebody on our committee actually called a couple weeks ago, where they had grant funding in hand for a project. It was a screen on the convention center to show silent movies on a loop, and they said, "How do we do that?" So this would be a great opportunity for something like that, to push something like that forward.
Okay, thank you. Derwin, you were first.
I wanted to know, was there any recommendation from you at this time in terms of what a starting budget of something should look like, in terms of there's a request at any point in time of what you all would think would be something to begin that process, just to understand what we may be looking at?
I know that in the past, $50,000 a year was reserved for public art, and I understand that there's $100,000 in the public art reserve that has not yet been spent from the 3 years that occupancy tax public art item was taken out.
So pretty much that same baseline that we've been using for, okay.
First of all, I just want to say it's a great idea. I think it really positions us to be ready to act on a project or an event that comes along without having to sort of reinvent the wheel each time. So if we have this process that's ready to go and a project comes along and we have funding that comes along, we can just kind of roll into action on it. I do have a question about timing. I mean, I know this has got to go through lots of discussion, but are we talking about 6 months to a year before? The reason I ask is I'm already getting a request to be on the panel, so from the commission.
It really depends on the city's process. It depends also on the county, if the county wants to be involved, and any discrepancies between both bodies getting worked out.
6 months-ish. Thanks.
Again, just want to say this is great. You guys know how I feel about anything that's visual, anything that's connected to art, the creative space, the creative mind. I just think it makes people better people. That's what I believe. I too, like Councilmember McIntosh, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's get the first one on the ground so all our people can come and see it and say, this is what we can have if you guys just kind of, I'm ready. I want to see some of this stuff. I know I see the film clip downtown and a couple of others, but I want something that looks like that. That really, when people come to Winston, they go like, wow, and then they take pictures and send it out on the social media, and people start to come to our city just to look at our art, much like people go to Philly to look at the murals on the buildings. I'm ready. Let's go.
You want a bear?
Yes, I'll take a bear. I'll take a squirrel. I don't care. Anything that brings people to our wonderful city that sets us uniquely apart and makes us different. That's all I care about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very exciting, and certainly thank all of you for the work you've done. Absolutely. Any other questions?
Oh, just as an art critic, I'll say yes to the blue bear, no to the creepy fingers coming up out of it.
Oh, I like that. I like that too.
Yeah, I'd
going in your lawn.
I mean, when the image flashed up on the screen, I thought, oh, that's neat. The longer I looked at it, the creepier it got. I'm afraid the public imagery has been too contaminated by the zombie fad.
Thanks, Kelly.
Oh, gee. Is there anything else anyone on the committee would like to bring up? Mr. Bessie, 5 minutes till your committee?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Meeting is adjourned.